सुझाव का तो विरोध कर रहा हूँ, उस पर लगना ही चाहिए। और भाई इतना सुझाव देकर, इतनी बात कह करके मैं माननीय मंत्री जी के विधेयक का समर्थन करता हूँ।
थैंक यू। वंगा गीता जी।
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Sir, I support this bill. It is a welcoming bill. I am congratulating and appreciate the Honorable Minister for taking initiations to really in certain provisions which could cause hardship to the litigants. Sir, so many 13 amendments are made in this amendment bill. Those are so many members are raised particular points. I support all the amendments. Service of summons, it's a very good amendment because delay in the services is very important. To allow the courier service, it is very helpful. And particularly judgment part. Judgment given within time frame limit because justice delayed is justice denied. Poor litigants are waited for so many years for judgment. Sir, I support all the amendment. Beside that, I raise only two points, sir. Sir, for variety of reasons, time lag of filling of vacancies and refusal of setting of benches of high courts in different regions in the states. The case dragged for years, resulting in considerable suffering and expenses to the litigants. Sir, a recent press report headline reads, 24 years old cheating case had to clear first stage of litigation. It reflects the stage of the practice of justice. The providing of speedy justice through shortcutting the procedure, setting up of more courts and high court benches is to be seen in the context of backlog over 33 million cases pending in the different courts. I request the Honorable Minister, I hope these amendments would be benefited to the litigants in practice also. Thank you, sir.
Shri C.P. Thirunavakrasu.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this bill. When Civil Procedure Code of 1999 was passed by the Parliament, there was a huge cry from the lawyers' side, and the Bar Association also objected to that. Bar Council also objected to the passing of the fixing a date for enforcement of the Act. Taking into consideration all the aspects of the lawyers and the Bar Association, the present Law Minister has taken confidence of all the sections of the lawyers and the other people's judiciary also, and invited them and had a frank discussion over the matter, and subsequently the law has been brought before this Parliament. So the same steps he has taken and the anguish of the Bar Association of the lawyers of our side, I am much thankful for the Law Minister for having brought the bill with such an amendment. With regard to I want to lay on 3 points. One is in order to avoid the delay, the fixation of time limit was fixed for filing of a written statement, and further, the judgment has to be pronounced within a period. A period has been fixed by way of this amendment, and above all, the time has been fixed for oral argument by the court. Within this stipulated period, the argument has to be concluded, and supplement that, or in addition to that, written arguments can also be filed. These are the salient factors which will ipso facto prove that to avoid the delay in the litigations, these things have been brought in force. And having a doubt with regard to the 3 points, which I request the Honorable Minister may kindly be clarified. As per raised by learned friend Kapil Sibal, as far as the injunction is concerned under Article 39(2)(b), the litigant public has to give a security. Law requires, and if you want to file an application for the injunction, a prima facie case, balance of convenience and irreparable injury. These are the three requisites in Order 39 if you want to get an injunction. There is no stipulation originally we should furnish a security as it is. And if, so what I submit is, as my land, the justice has been pointed out, if suppose party want to drag a proceeding after an injunction, fix a day. The injunction is valid for a period of 30 days or the injunction is valid for a period of 1 week. Then if it is that there is no possibility of extending the injunction as it is. So asking a party to furnishing a security is not good. With great respect I submit, even the standing committee also in the report said insitting of security is not correct, it may kindly be deleted. In spite of that, it has been moved, it has been inserted into this. I request it may kindly be taken into consideration. As far as the service by courier is concerned, under the law, if a postal service has been made, there is a presumption under the N-Class Act, it has been duly served. If a refusal has been made, it has been duly refused. As far as the courier service is concerned, there is no presumption under the law as it is. So if a courier says and is manipulated, if he delivers to some other person or if he make an endorsement, it is refused. There is no provision under the law to take actions. Suppose as far as amines are concerned, if served a summons, if a false endorsement is made, the court is entitled to take action upon the parties. If the postal authority has committed mistakes, the postal authority can take an action, and also since he is a public servant, a wrong endorsement is made, we can take an action. As far as the couriers are concerned, he is not a public servant, he is not an officer of the court. So under those circumstances, the courier has to be deleted as it is. And third point, another point which I would like to stress is, as far as the affidavits are concerned, we can file chief examination can be done by way of an affidavit. My submission is well and good. What is the period of time by which an affidavit has to be filed before the court? It is not stipulated under the Act. Suppose the trial has been begun, whether you have to file the affidavit prior to that, or after this trial, the court has put a note, the trial has been sorted from this particular day. We have to file the affidavit on a particular day. If it is not stipulated there, the counsel will get an adjournment. I want file some more time, file an affidavit. I want some more time, filing an affidavit. Thereby they will drag on the proceedings continuously for a short time. So, if the court has passed an order for fixation of trial, the courts will also stipulate the time. You have to file an affidavit for the plaintiff such and such day, for the witnesses such and such. Suppose I want to examine 3 witnesses, I have to file all the affidavits in which particular period. So, since it is not stipulated, I request the Honorable Ministers fix the time, otherwise there will be continuously they will be dragging on. So, other aspect, I all welcome this bill. It is a need for the hour. It will really, the shorten the litigation, really will be mitigated by this step. Thank you very much.
Shri B.J. Panda.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, for giving me this opportunity. Sir, I rise to support this bill and the amendments. This august House has the privilege of membership of a large number of luminaries from the law, both from the legal profession as well as from the judiciary. And some of them have spoken and given very illuminating viewpoints on these amendments that are being proposed. Sir, I speak only as a lay person. So the rule of law is fundamental to any civil society. And the measure of rule of law in the functioning of any civil society, one of the most important measures is the efficient functioning of law. As Srimati Vanga Geeta pointed out, justice delayed is justice denied. And the statistics of the thousands and lakhs of cases which are piled up in Indian courts bear witness to this fact that justice undeniably is delayed in this country. So the phrase Pyrrhic victory was probably coined for decisions finally arrived at in Indian courts. Because by and large, the time taken is so long that any victory is only symbolic. Sir, the civil procedures have developed in a manner in our country that it opens itself up to abuse, and not just occasional abuse, but systematic abuse. In fact, the strategy, the legal strategy of many litigants hinges upon taking advantage of the delays that are built into the system. So this happens in all manner of cases, and this delay which invariably happens, whom does it assist? It assists the wealthy and it assists the strong against the common person, against the weak. Because those that have economic strength, those that have other kinds of strength, muscle power, have the ability to stick it out, have the ability to take advantage of the situation while decisions get delayed for years and years and years. So there is these delays that have got inbuilt into our system provides both an incentive as well as a disincentive. It provides incentives to litigants to disregard their obligations, to sacrifice their rights under law. It provides disincentives in encouraging people to stand up for their rights, because the process of going through the courts is so tortuous. The process of arriving at any decision whatsoever, good or bad, is so unlikely to have any bearing during the lifetime of the litigant that it provides a disincentive for anybody to actually stand up for their rights. So the rule of law, the efficient functioning of law, is fundamental to many other aspects other than just civil society. It is fundamental to economic development itself, which is a major issue for a country like ours, which houses the largest number of poor people in the world. Let me give an example, sir. The comparison in international markets of India's potential versus China has been now debated for more than 20 years. And for a long time, it has been mentioned that while India suffers from something which I have defined as the democracy tax, and I will define it again, sir. The democracy tax is something that I have defined as something that calls for an excessive need for consensus building before the country can move forward on important issues of policy. China doesn't suffer from this. Their system enables quick decision making. But we are supposed to be enjoying something as a result of having democracy. We are supposed to be enjoying the rule of law. We are supposed to have a much better established system of rule of law than countries like China. But in reality, that's not the case, sir. In reality, what happens is justice in China may be summary, but there is justice of some kind. There are decisions of some kind. So what we ought to have been having is a balance between due process. We can't have summary justice. Due process, but also efficient and speedy functioning of the system. So unfortunately, sir, we suffer on both counts. We have an excessive need to build consensus, and yet we do not have speedy justice. There is also a commercial impact to an inefficient system of the rule of law. There is very poor protection of contractual rights. I mentioned, sir, that this favors the wealthy, this favors the strong. This applies not just to individuals, but it also applies to the corporate world. Who does it favor? This kind of a system favors large companies versus small companies. It perpetuates the status quo against the introduction of new and healthy competition. It supports monopolies against new competitors. Sir, Mr. Kapil Sibal already mentioned about the issue of delays in arbitration. I would just like to touch upon it briefly. Arbitration, sir, the process of arbitration normally is seen as a means of cutting short the process of going through a judicial process in court. In our country, sir, it has been perverted. Arbitration is nothing but a further lengthening of the process. The system has been abused, the laws that we have in place for arbitration have been abused. So this runs across the board, sir. Everywhere there is delay, there is abuse, there is a systematic abuse, and there is encouragement for this abuse by the system itself. So these amendments that have been put up by the Honorable Minister actually bring about a reinstatement of certain aspects of due process. This bill, which was approved in 1999, did incorporate many measures for speeding up the process, for making it more efficient. And we have heard about the representations that have been received. We have heard about the opposition from certain quarters, and almost all of these hinge on the issue of due process. Sir, any of our systems, any of our judicial procedures have to have this balance between speed and efficiency on the one hand and due process on the other hand. But what we have had historically for these last so many decades is undue process. we have had nothing but process. Justice is often forgotten in the whole business. Sir, I will end in just a minute's time. So these amendments bring about both a balance between speed in terms of these specific amendments which relate to summons, which relate to time limits for arguments, for time limits for recording evidence, and also deleting second appeals in certain cases. They also reintroduce due process, as I mentioned, by way of restoring certain appeals, by way of providing extension of time limits for genuine reasons, for reasons to be recorded in writing. And these, I think, are excellent measures. Sir, I will not take up more time. I would just like to point out that the Law Minister, Honorable Minister of Law, is to be complimented for bringing about this. Many other suggestions have been made by several other members about speeding up other aspects of our legal system, and I urge him to take action on those as he has done on this one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Shri Aman Das, please be brief.
Sir, thank you very much. I requested you to allow me to speak a few minutes simply because I have suffered litigation for 5 years and I have gained some experience how the legal fraternity works, how also the judicial fraternity works. I am a poor teacher, retired teacher, without pay, without pension, and I had to fight a case for 5 years against a multi-millionaire filmmaker of Bollywood. What was my fault? He wanted me, I should write 64 episode serials on a great historical character, and I submitted chapter after chapter, episode after episode. But when I got the information that he is going to sell my script to somebody else to make money, I had to publish my books. That was my fault, sir. Now I thought the case will be disposed within a month or so. But to my surprise, Mr. Law Minister, sir, I appeal to you, when you think of legal reform, reform of civil procedure code, etc., amendment, would you kindly prescribe a code of conduct for honorable learned members of legal fraternity? I would come to the court, my lawyers would come, but opposition lawyer would call for adjournment. And the judge, honorable judge, with all respect let me say, without thinking or pausing for a moment, he would allow adjournment. And 7 times adjournment I had to suffer. I will come from my distant place, pay heavily to my lawyers, senior advocates of the Supreme Court, and then go back. Case is adjourned, 7 times adjourned. I echo the sentiment of Honorable Vijay Panda, justice delayed is justice denied. Why should the judge allow that adjournment? Why should the lawyer from the other side call for the adjournment? Without reason, without cause. I won the case, but after winning the case, when my lawyers advised me, damage suit, 1 crore. What is the court fee? 1,20,000 or something like that. I said, if I go in for that, I am already a pauper.
Okay.
I have sold everything to fight this case. Let money power versus moral power. I have won the case, but I cannot go in for damage because I cannot pay the court fee. I am satisfied that I have won the case. Thank you very much.
Shri Alam Singhvi.
It is also said sometimes that justice hurried is justice buried. This bill seeks to strike a balance. A bill which we have awaited to be passed for some time, because in fact in 1999 we did pass a bill, but it aroused some opposition, and I am glad that the government looked into the substance of what was represented to them and has responded by bringing forth a bill which is, I think, well thought out. A very warm accolade is due to our Minister of Law for having brought this bill. Though I regret that the bill of the year 2000 is being passed now in the year 2002. It should have been expedited also, just like the litigation is sought to be expedited. I think the bill is addressing a question which has become a chronic malady in our system. The Honorable Minister has himself experience of litigation, first-hand experience of litigation, and what is more, he received the feedback of the legal profession. On behalf of the legal profession, I should say that what he has done is very, very satisfactory. This satisfaction comes from the fact that he has not stood merely by what was done in 1999, but has been willing, for instance, to restore the appeals to division bench of the High Courts and writs under Article 226 and 227. The question of restoration of some of these procedures were necessary, and I think it is welcome provision that it has been done. I think, Mr. Vice Chairman, the substance of this amendment bill is in expediting the entire process, in condensing and compressing the time frame for litigation, which tends to procrastinate itself, which tends to be protracted in our country, very rarely with a good excuse and very often without any excuse at all. As the Honourable Member, Shri Justice Ranganath Mishra pointed out, sometimes an injunction is obtained and then it becomes a matter of vested interest to delay the disposal of the case. Sometimes a matter is brought to the court to harass someone and to allow it to remain there so that that harassment continues. Very often litigation is protracted and procrastinated because the summons are not served in time, documents are not filed in time, production of documents is delayed, pleadings are insufficient. All this happens mainly because the whole system has become too permissive and it lacks in strict discipline about it. The law that is now sought to be passed by this House is, I think, also clarificatory. It also restates that which has become established as a matter of law through decisions of the courts. This is important because restatement and reform of law go hand in hand. And I think it is very, very welcome that the time limit for oral arguments has been limited. It's also welcome that the judgments have now to be pronounced within a reasonable time frame. We know of cases in which, and I am sure that those of us who have practiced at the bar have all had this experience, of a case being argued for a very long time, a year or 2 years before, and the judgment not having been delivered. When the judgment is delivered, it is out of touch with the record of the case. And this is something which ought to be prevented, although it did not require a written rule to be enacted as a rule of law. But it was necessary because the breach of these provisions have become the rule. And that is why I think it is important that the mandate of the law is made both with regard to the judgments to be delivered in time. A very reasonable frame of time is prescribed in this proposed bill. The time limit for oral arguments is, I think, also very important, and this is to be welcomed. The abolition of a second appeal in matters in which the valuation is only 20,000 is also welcome in our present day and time. Time was when our constitution was passed, when even the valuation of 20,000 was enough to qualify for an appeal to the Supreme Court as a matter of right of appeal. But 20,000 rupees of those days are no longer 20,000 rupees of today. It is important, I think, that litigation must be given a push in the direction of expeditious disposal, a just sense of the people must be invoked, and I think it is from that point of view that this bill deserves to be most heartily welcomed, and I do hope that it will have a quicker progress, both in this, not only in this House, but in the other House, so that this legislation is put on the statute book and would always remind us that at least we added some gentle nudge to the process of expediting the course of justice. With these words, may I say, Mr. Vice Chairman, that bills like this need to occupy more of our time, rather than the fireworks which give us no light. Here is a bill which is not spectacular, in which no great fireworks are to be witnessed, but here is a bill which serves the cause of the common people. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
माननीय मंत्री जी। हाँ,
and it's unfair not to suddenly pounce upon everybody and say something. But I just heard my honorable friend Dr. Singhvi say that there are no sparks in this bill. I think there are many more sparks in the bill for the legal profession. And fireworks. Well, if there are no fireworks, there are a lot of sparks in this bill for the legal profession, and I'm sure that the legal profession, to which many of us here in this house belong, would certainly like to see a way forward, because people are very disgruntled and dissatisfied with what's happening in the country so far as the judicial system and the administration of justice is concerned. And this bill, in my humble opinion, will go a long way towards redeeming a pledge to improve the administration of justice. With these few words, sir, I do very strongly support this bill.
माननीय विधि मंत्री।
Sir, I am very grateful to a very large number of honorable members who have participated in this discussion. Most of them have supported the bill. Some have also either raised certain issues for clarification, as also certain other reforms which are relevant for us for the future. But before I deal with what a lot of our distinguished friends here have said, I must start by reacting to what the Honorable Member Mr. Das said. In fact, his was a pain and agony which an ordinary litigant has to bear as far as the legal system is concerned. He has to bear it because he finds that the system is becoming costlier. System at times is very slow. But let me say, and I'm sure a lot of members here who belong to the legal fraternity are fully conscious of the drawbacks within the legal system. We feel that our legal system has many strengths also. It's a fair, independent system. It's a powerful system. But it's a slow system, and we are trying to correct that speed process by virtue of several legislations. But eventually, the success and failure of the implementation of a large number of these legislations will also depend upon how the legal fraternity as a whole, both lawyers and judges, react to a legislation of this kind. Let me also say, even when we mention and state the problem, there is a lot of work which is being done. Figures were mentioned with regard to what is the pendency in our courts. The pendency in the subordinate courts in this country is a little over 2 crores, about 2 crores and 3 lakhs. For the last 5 years, it's more or less static. Now, when we state this figure, this looks very alarming. But when we compare it with another figure, that every year 1 crore new cases are filed, and approximately 1 crore cases in the subordinate courts are disposed of. Our problem today is how do we beat down this backlog and bring this figure of 2 crores downwards so that the delay which takes place in the system itself can be curtailed. But then a system which is capable of disposing of almost 1 crore cases in the subordinate courts every year. We are a large country, we have 1/6 of the world's population. We had more than 1 lakh of cases in our Supreme Court, but by just speed in the last 10-12 years and by various other managerial skills in the registry, they brought the figure down now to about 21 or 22,000. And therefore, to say that the legal system, really nothing much happens, at times may come out of our anger or our anguish when we react to a particular situation. But I think through this bill we are considering as to how do we resolve this whole problem. Some honorable members raised the question, though it directly doesn't arise in the Civil Procedure Code, in relation to the vacancies. This is a matter of serious concern, both the judicial institution, and we've been taking it up with the states, with the high courts. There are at present about a little more than 1800 vacancies in the subordinate judiciary in the country, 155 in the high courts. And we are taking it up very strongly with the high courts that the recommendations with regard to this must be expedited so that these vacancies itself can be filled up. Recently we had a pronouncement of the Supreme Court which said that you must radically increase the number of judges in the subordinate courts. Now, of course, this will be a burden on the exchequer itself, but it's a welcome suggestion. And in phases, we have to increase the number so that this figure of 2 crores that we find in the subordinate courts, at least there are more judges who can deal with this situation. Sir, as far as the specific provisions are concerned, my friend Mr. Sibal raised some very substantive points. He is absolutely right when he says that our procedural laws, in view of the changing situation in the world, the changing experiments which other countries have tried, must also require an overhaul. So even when this particular bill was discussed by the Law Commission, and when they sent us this report, they also mentioned, and I'll just read the opening paragraph of what the Law Commission told us. In the second phase of this work, the Commission intends to take up the revision of the code in its entirety, since a comprehensive revision of the entire code would take comparatively longer time. Similarly, for the purposes of reviewing the functioning of our criminal procedure code, we've already appointed a committee which is now going around the whole country, meeting lawyers, litigants, police officers, state governments, holding seminars, holding discussions. They've already held about 4 major programs all around the country, and by the end of the year, we expect that committee in relation to the criminal procedure code also to make to give us its recommendations. Some substantive points which have been raised. Mr. Sibal raised a very important question with regard to the provisions of Order 18. Order 18 uses the word may in relation to addressing oral arguments, and with the permission of the court shall in relation to giving written submissions if the court so agrees for its purpose. Well, I may assure him that the intention of the government certainly is not that oral arguments in any way are to be curtailed. The reason I may mention why the word may has been used is because when you legislate and you follow a particular pattern which is used in several laws, the Criminal Procedure Code has a similar provision in section 314. And it is almost similar to the language of 314 that this language of Order 18 has been used. And even in the Criminal Procedure Code, where 314 says the accused or his counsel may address oral arguments, it has never been interpreted to mean that there is a discretion whether he may or may not be permitted. The word may perhaps has been used in order to give the right to the accused in the Criminal Procedure Code and a similar right to a litigant in the Civil Procedure Code that he is entitled to if he so desires. I have no doubt that no judge is ever going to deny to a litigant a right to address his case orally. All that is intended is that we all have this experience that at times oral arguments continue for an indefinite period. Particularly this has been seen more in the high courts than any other layer of the judicial institution. So depending upon the subject matter, if a judge so desires, he may regulate the time as far as the oral hearing is concerned. This power to regulate the time of oral hearing is also contained in section 314 of the Civil Procedure Code. One issue which has been raised by several members is in relation to the requirement of a security under Order 39. I may clarify that when though this issue really no longer remains very relevant today, there is a provision in the original Civil Procedure Code under Order 39 Rule 2. Order 39 Rule 1 relates to injunctions in relation to property. Order 39 Rule 2 is injunctions in relation to breach of contract or any continuing breach. Order 39 Rule 2, Sub-Rule 2 already says, and this is the old CPC, the court may order by order grant such injunction on such terms as the duration of this injunction, keeping an account, giving security or otherwise as the court thinks fit. Now this is a provision which has been time tested. This is applicable to Order 39 Rule 2 but not applicable to Order 39 Rule 1. The amendment in 1999 brought in a provision in relation to Order 39 Rule 1 which was different in language from this provision and almost made granting of a direction with regard to security mandatory. This led to various apprehensions because people may not come to the court to agitate their disputes in relation to a property because in case they are confronted with a very large amount of security which is to be given. And therefore it was felt that the provision requires an alteration. What we did in consultation with the Bar Council and the Bar Associations, that the provision in relation to Order 39 Rule 2 ipso facto now also was made applicable to Order 39 Rule 1. That was the purport of the 2000 amendment. But the standing committee felt that no special situation has arisen since this CPC has been in force, which shows that the provisions lacked in view of this provision not being applicable to Order 39 Rule 1, and therefore suggested that we continue with the situation as it exists in the original CPC as such. In deference to the opinion of the standing committee, we accepted that suggestion, and in the official amendment which we have moved, this suggestion for making the 39(2) provision applicable to Rule 39(1), we have suggested that we delete it, so the provision in the original CPC continues to be maintained. That's the official amendment as such which we have suggested. Another provision which invited certain discussions was in relation to appointment of local commissioners for the purposes of recording the evidence. Sir, the position as it stands of today, the judge has to record the evidence himself, but what some high courts and some other courts have been doing, though very rarely, that if both the litigants agree, they refer the recording of evidence to a commissioner because a commissioner doesn't have the kind of time pressures which a court has, and therefore is able to record the evidence expeditiously and file a record with the court. Now we had extensive discussions. There were several issues which came up. One issue was in the trial courts, some litigants in relation to small disputes may actually be so poor and the stakes may be so little that for them to afford a commissioner's fee itself may be a little difficult. So we came out with a suggestion that as a rule, high courts where there is an original site, evidence can be recorded by commissioners because cases of larger stakes are there. In the subordinate courts, we left it to the discretion of the judge whether he wants to record it himself or it can be recorded by a commissioner himself. But after considering various suggestions and the report of the standing committee, we were now of the view that there need not be any distinction between the two forums, and both in relation to the high courts and the lower courts. If the judge feels that the subject matter is such that the evidence in the interest of justice can be recorded by a commissioner, he will direct to do so. I am sure some judicial forum will give proper guidelines by a judicial pronouncement as to which cases are to be recorded by the commissioner and where are cases where the judges themselves may record it. May I just give examples? Today, and it's a figure which at least when I realized it, it shook my conscience. Banks and financial institutions have lent money to people. Every time an issue comes up, we raise the issue of non-performing assets. I tried to check up before a forum like the Debt Recovery Tribunal, where monies have been loaned by banks and financial institutions. The total claims pending, and these are all monies given through banking transactions, through checks, through drafts. The total claims pending are 1,10,000 crores. And the only reason why people who have taken these monies benefit, because they know that recording of evidence date will be fixed after a couple of years, and then you take an adjournment and you get another few years. Cases which are based on negotiable instruments, where checks have bounced, where monies have been given and payments are almost admitted. There are litigants who are waiting to recover their properties back. Now these kind of cases, if the judge feels in the interest of justice, can be referred to a commissioner for recording of evidence, and we've said the commissioners will record evidence and return the record in 60 days, because in normal civil cases, except in very high commercial disputes, it doesn't take more than 4 or 5 sittings to record the entire evidence of a case. And this one measure, if implemented, can reduce to 60 days a stage of a litigation which otherwise will take several years. And therefore, we've left it in the first instance to the judge himself on his discretion to decide whether a case is required the evidence is required to be recorded by a commissioner or not. One objection which was made was that traditionally under our law of evidence, a judge must also know what the demeanor of a particular witness is. Now, this was originally conceived to be so because once trials started, till such time trials concluded, the judge would record evidence, he would immediately hear arguments and then pronounce his judgment. Now, this was the original concept under which we had a provision that he must also know whether a witness, what is his conduct like, what is his demeanor like, does he appear to be reliable or otherwise. Today, we actually have a situation where every date of evidence is fixed after 2 years. The judge who records the evidence, after 3 successors, somebody else comes and decides the case. And therefore, the successors are not likely to know what the demeanor of a witness before a predecessor was. And therefore, this provision really, though relevant, is not being so effectively implemented. And for this merely to stand in the way of recording evidence itself may not be sufficient in itself, particularly when a stage of a case itself could be curtailed if this provision took place. On oral arguments being curtailed, I am sure my very distinguished colleagues, lawyer members who are present here would remember that when we argue some important cases, we look at the calendar as to how many days it will take. Let us recollect how many days did the most important case in the world take? The case which decided who the president of the US would be. Before the US Supreme Court, Mr. Al Gore versus Bush took 1.5 hours. But an ordinary property dispute, some intellectual property injunction can take weeks and months being argued before our courts. And nobody says that in those jurisdictions, justice gets buried merely because you regulate the time during which cases are going to be heard. Sir, there are several important arguments, suggestions which have been made, and one particular suggestion which has been made by Justice Mishra with regard to the injunctions being applicable for a limited period of time. With all his judicial experience, for this, do we really need an amendment to the law, or can our judges not do it within the existing framework of law? Sir, I'll just remind you, when the Constitution was amended in the mid-70s, we added Article 226, Sub-Article 3. Sub-Article 3 said that the injunction, when it is granted in pursuant to a writ jurisdiction, and the person against whom it is granted or the state against whom it is granted moves an application for vacation, if the application is not disposed of, the injunction is deemed to be vacated. Now, I am sure my very senior colleagues may not remember many cases where we've seen this provision actually being implemented before the courts. And therefore, similarly, even while granting injunctions, some courts have always granted injunctions in terms of language. Injunction granted for a period of 6 weeks, serve the defendant within 2 weeks and come before me. But effectively, it is for the judges to actually regulate the power under Order 39 and grant those injunctions. And I am sure, seeing the equities of a particular case, if they grant these injunctions in this manner, it is perfectly within the powers of this court. I am sure we as lawmakers would welcome a situation of this kind. So, some suggestion was made with regard to the provisions of service of summons. I don't think we should be particularly worried on this service of summons by couriers, because courier business has been acquiring a certain amount of credibility. They serve within 24 hours, 48 hours. And that is why we've said every court will have, every district court will have, every high court will have its own service of courier agencies. And if they find somebody is unreliable, he can be taken off the list of that agency. They would be interested in their own businesses, and their own credibility will ensure that they serve the businesses well. Order 5, Rule 16 itself provides for signatures on personal service, which is not a postal service. Similarly, would be the provisions in relation to this, because this would be another mode of personal service itself. So, one last submission, if we see the overall picture as it would emerge, Mr. Panda said that there is a democracy tax. In a democracy tax, you try and balance between speed, you try and balance between the decision-making process, and you are able to carry all sections along. The 99 amendments have certain very well-considered provisions. Some provisions have been smoothened out after discussion. Today, the CPC, as would look in terms of its time frame, you file a case, you serve through expeditious processes, through postal services, through process fee, through electronic devices, through courier services. So instead of spending months and years, as Dr. Singhvi pointed out, you can serve the defendant within days. The maximum period for a written statement is ordinarily 30 days. For special reasons, the judge can extend it by another 60 days. Issues get framed. If the judge record evidence, it depends on how much time the judge takes. If he refers it to a commissioner, ordinarily within 60 days, unless the subject matter requires extension of time. And thereafter, arguments for which he can curtail the time. And finally, a judgment which we have said he must ordinarily deliver within 30 days. Well, I can only say to what Mr. Das had said, we as lawmakers can frame this. But to what extent this is mandatorily implemented is really for the bar and the bench to really cooperate within the system and decide this. I'll just end, sir, by narrating two anecdotes, because Mr. Panda said that the Chinese system and the due process there. The Vice President of the Chinese Supreme Court was in India recently. And we were asking each other, how long does it take for cases to be tried in our jurisdictions? So I was trying to very convincingly tell him that we are now trying to shorten our CPC time. And he was being very apologetic. And he told me, sir, our system is now delayed. Originally it used to take 2 weeks. Now it can go up for 4 to 6 weeks to decide a case. That is the system which those countries have really been able to follow. When I said in response to Mr. Das that even our legal fraternity will have to consider, I remember an incident which I experienced. Somebody had asked a question in Parliament as to how many judgments are reserved for a period of more than 1 year after arguments have been heard. I addressed letters to Chief Justices all over the country that please give me the figures of each High Court, how many judgments are reserved. Some High Court said none. Some said, gave the honest figure, and those who didn't want to give the actual figure says, it's a question which relates to independence of judiciary. And therefore, we will not tell you the figure. Now, I entered a further correspondence that is the figure, just as we are entitled to know how many cases, we are also entitled to know how many judgments, so the lawmaker must know where the shoe pinches so that the law can be corrected accordingly. Now, somehow one of the newspapers published it, that there is this debate going on whether the courts can inform the number of judgments pending or not. I went to England last summer and I called on the Lord Chancellor. And this curious newspaper cutting where it had appeared, through the internet had been made available to him before my meeting with him. So when I went and met him amongst the various discussions, he said, I am told you are also having a problem with regard to delay in delivery of judgments. I said, how did you know? He said, well, in the brief which was put up to me, this was informed to me. And I said, when you said also, means is there a similar problem here? He said, well, a similar problem did arise. And I can only tell you, advise you what I told my colleagues. I told my colleagues that independence can never be a camouflage for inefficiencies. And thereafter, the debate in my country came to an end. Therefore, I am sure Mr. Das will appreciate that we in this legislature can make laws, the state governments, the central governments makes infrastructures available, but we expect the cooperation of the entire system if we do expect expedition of this form to take place. Thank you, sir.
अब मैं प्रश्न उपस्थित कर रहा हूँ। प्रश्न यह है कि सिविल प्रक्रिया संहिता संशोधन विधेयक 2000 पर विचार किया जाए। जो माननीय सदस्य इसके पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो माननीय सदस्य इसके विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, प्रस्ताव स्वीकृत हुआ। अब हम धारावार विधेयक पर विचार करेंगे। धारा 2 से धारा 6 विधेयक के अंग बने। प्रश्न उपस्थित कर रहा हूँ। प्रश्न यह है कि धारा 2 से धारा 6 विधेयक के अंग माने जाएं। जो माननीय सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो माननीय सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः प्रस्ताव स्वीकृत हुआ। धारा 7 विधेयक का अंग बने, इसमें एक संशोधन है। माननीय मंत्री जी।
सर, आई मूव द अमेंडमेंट।
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुआ। प्रश्न यह है कि संशोधन स्वीकार किया जाए। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुआ। अब मैं धारा 7 को यथा संशोधित आपके सम्मुख विचार के लिए रखता हूँ। प्रश्न यह है कि धारा 7 यथा संशोधित स्वीकार किया जाए। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 7 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुई। धारा 8 से धारा 11 विधेयक के अंग बने। प्रश्न यह है कि धारा 8 से धारा 11 विधेयक के अंग बने। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 8 से धारा 11 तक स्वीकृत हुए। धारा 12 विधेयक का अंग बने। इसमें 2 संशोधन हैं माननीय मंत्री जी।
Sir, I move the 2 amendments.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुए। प्रश्न कर रहा हूं, जो मान्य सदस्य संशोधनों के पक्ष में हैं कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुए। अब मैं धारा 12 यथा संशोधित वोट के लिए रखता हूं। जो मान्य सदस्य इस पक्ष में हैं कि धारा 12 यथा संशोधित स्वीकार की जाए कृपया हाँ कहें। जो इसके विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। धारा 12 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुए। धारा 13 विधेयक का अंग बने। प्रश्न रख रहा हूं, जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 13 स्वीकृत हुई। धारा 14 विधेयक का अंग बने। इसमें भी एक संशोधन है माननीय मंत्री जी।
Sir, I move the amendment.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुआ। प्रश्न रख रहा हूं, जो मान्य सदस्य संशोधन के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुआ। अब मैं धारा 14 यथा संशोधित मत के लिए रखता हूं। जो मान्य सदस्य इस पक्ष में है कि धारा 14 यथा संशोधित स्वीकार हो कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। धारा 14 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुई। धारा 15 विधेयक का अंग बने। इसमें एक संशोधन है माननीय मंत्री।
Sir, I move the amendment.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुआ। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में है कि संशोधन स्वीकृत हो कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुआ। अब मैं धारा 15 यथा संशोधित आपके मत के लिए रखता हूं। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 15 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुई। धारा 16 विधेयक का अंग बने। इसमें 2 संशोधन है माननीय मंत्री जी।
Sir, I move the amendment.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुए। प्रश्न कर रहा हूं, जो मान्य सदस्य पक्ष में हैं कि संशोधन स्वीकृत हो कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुए। अब मैं धारा 16 यथा संशोधित आपके मत के लिए रखता हूं। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में हैं कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 16 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुई। धारा 17 विधेयक के अंग बने। इसमें भी एक संशोधन है माननीय।
Sir, I move the amendment.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुआ। जो मान्य सदस्य संशोधन के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुआ। अब मैं धारा 17 यथा संशोधित आपके मत के लिए रखता हूं। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 17 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुई। धारा 1 विधेयक का अंग बने। इसमें भी एक संशोधन है।
Sir, I move the amendment.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुआ। जो मान्य सदस्य संशोधन के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुआ। अब मैं धारा 1 यथा संशोधित आपके मत के लिए रखता हूं। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः धारा 1 यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुई। अधिनियमन सूत्र विधेयक के अंग बने। इसमें भी एक संशोधन है माननीय मंत्री
Sir,
जी।
I move the amendment.
संशोधन प्रस्तुत हुआ। जो मान्य सदस्य पक्ष में है कि संशोधन स्वीकृत हो कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में है कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः संशोधन स्वीकृत हुआ। अब मैं अधिनियमन सूत्र जैसा संशोधित हुआ को आपके मत के लिए रखता हूँ। जो मान्य सदस्य के पक्ष में है कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में है कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः अधिनियमन सूत्र यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुआ। शीर्षक विधेयक के अंग बने। प्रश्न कर रहा हूं, जो मान्य सदस्य पक्ष में है कि शीर्षक विधेयक के अंग बने कृपया हाँ कहें। जो मान्य सदस्य के विरोध में है कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः स्वीकृत शीर्षक स्वीकृत हुआ। माननीय मंत्री जी।
चुपकी संख्या
Sir, I move the amendment.
प्रश्न यह है कि विधेयक यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत किया जाए।
Sir, I move that the bill as amended be passed.
प्रस्ताव प्रस्तुत हुआ। जो मान्य सदस्य पक्ष में है कि विधेयक यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत किया जाए कृपया हाँ कहें। जो सदस्य इसके विरोध में है कृपया नहीं कहें। हाँ की संख्या अधिक है, अतः विधेयक यथा संशोधित स्वीकृत हुआ।
सर एक तीसरा कॉलम भी होना चाहिए, चुपकी संख्या अधिक है।
हाँ?
चुपकी संख्या अधिक है। हाँ ना तो बोलते ही मैं चुप जाते हैं।
माननीय उमर अब्दुल्ला। हज कमेटी बिल 2000।
Sir, on behalf of my senior colleague, I move that a bill to establish a Hajj Committee of India and state Hajj committees for making arrangements for the pilgrimage of Muslims for Hajj and for matters connected therewith be taken into consideration.
प्रस्ताव प्रस्तुत हुआ। माननीय के रहमान खान।
Mr. Vice Chairman, sir, I rise to welcome the Hajj bill. Sir, it has taken almost 5 years from the time the bill was drafted and introduced, and I congratulate the Honorable Minister for introducing the bill and then bringing it before the Council. Sir, this bill seek to replace the Hajj Committee Bill of 1959. Sir, Hajj is a sacred duty casted upon every Muslim. It is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It is obligatory on every Muslim who can afford to perform Hajj in his once in lifetime. Sir, India has the second largest population which subscribes to the faith of Islam. Hence, India has to play a very major role in the management of Hajj. Since the advent of Islam in India, people are going on Hajj pilgrims from 1000 to 2300 years by road, by sea, by whatever means. They are performing and they will continue to perform till the doomsday. Hence, as a nation, as a democratic country, it is our constitutional right under Article 25 of the Constitution, because it is one of the pillars of Islam. It's the duty of the state to provide facilities and to perform the Hajj, which will be part of its religious obligation under Article 25 of the Constitution. Rightly so, the Government of India enacted an act to to manage the Hajj in 1959. After 40 years, it was thought that the act needs lot of changes. There are a lot of changes. People used to go by ship from Bombay. Then the original act was enacted. It was enacted keeping in view of the compulsion of sending Hajis by ship at Bombay, and the act was only, the committee was constituted based on people who are coming from Bombay. But now that is not the case. The Hajj travel by sea route is cancelled. Now all the Hajis are going through air, and then Hajj flights are being taken off from different parts of the country. Hence, the act also needs a wider representation. The committee also needs a wider representation. So hence there is a need for the changes which has been brought out in this bill. Sir, we are looking the Hajj as only a religious performance of the, it is not so. A democratic, a secular country, we should also look into its socio-political and economic aspect of the Hajj. Because Hajj is a congregation of more than 2 million people drawn from all parts of the world. Almost all the Muslim countries, almost all the part of the world where Muslims live, they come there. So it is, this congregation can be used by the countries for projecting its socio-political and economic interest also. But unfortunately, it has remained a religious issue. That is why there is a need for us to look into, it is not just passing a legislation to enabling for performance of Hajj, a committee is constituted and all that. Because here I would like to state that it can be Hajj can act as a powerful institution for even mobilizing the saving and investment. Because it is very important for the Honorable Minister to note this. Malaysia, a country